And welcome to Brookside Chats. My name is Brooklyn, and today I'm with our guest, Austin Exline.
Hey, Brooke, thanks for having me. I am a philosopher. I have a bachelor's degree in philosophy from UNO, and today we're going to talk about some systematic issues with information in today's world.
So, what is the idea of an echo chamber? I've always been hearing that there's a lot of like echo chambers with like the world today and with like news outlets, and how people have this kind of cult-like mindset when they come up with like information, and they just kind of reject certain aspects of information, if that makes sense.
Yes, it exactly does. And actually the cult-like analogy is pretty commonly used when talking about echo chambers. But in order to understand echo chambers, we kind of have to talk about two different information systems: echo chambers and epistemic bubbles. They're both social structures that exclude outside source information, but for very different reasons. An epistemic bubble is simply when a community or group is not exposed to the outside information. These are pretty popular. You run into them on social media and stuff like that, just like where you have a community that shares ideals, they're from a common group, and so other people aren't really brought in to share outside opinions. The echo chamber, though, is a much bigger problem. That is when a person, a leader of some sort of group or information system, is actively trying to exclude outside source information. Mm-hmm. So one of the most common examples that you can find is in political parties, for example. So standardly, say, conservative media would try to discredit liberal media that has conflicting views, and vice versa. It happens all over with any kind of group like that when they're in opposition. And it's dangerous because those outside views are a really useful tool for people to decide, to try to gauge whether or not they're reasoning correctly, right? I might come to a conclusion, and if I only look to people who came to that same conclusion, I'm not going to find any faults in my logic. But if 90% of the population came to a different conclusion, one of them might be able to tell me, hey, here's where you made a mistake, right? This is where you kind of got off the rails.
Can you also see that in like kind of like not just like in like a political sense, but like also like a religious sense? Say like, you know, an example, they'll probably hate me. Scientology, for instance, since like you hear about like anyone that is like saying any negative things is labeled as a suppressive person. So
no, for sure. Again, religions also have an example. Just the idea of if somebody is in opposition to you, somebody has a different idea or a viewpoint than you, if you are trying to discredit that person, like if whoever is wherever you're getting information is trying to discredit that person, then you've got an echo chamber. The echo chamber is essentially a epistemic bubble, but with that aspect of distrust put into it. Somebody is actively trying to cause you to distrust other people and to listen to their information as like your sole source of information.
So can you give me so say if like somebody is in an echo chamber and they don't really know they're in an echo chamber, would you like, what would you say to kind of tell some good telltale signs on like what they're in?
So again, it's usually pretty difficult to realize when you're in an echo chamber yourself, because typically you are committed to whatever beliefs that echo chamber has put on. So again, we'll say the political parties, say if a person who listen to Rush Limbaugh every day thinks that the liberal media is completely false, they're not going to be like, oh, maybe I should give a good listen to the liberal media and see if they're false myself. They've heard all these things every day from their source. So really, it's what we need to be wary of is if we are getting our information from a source that is trying to discredit other sources, we should immediately be skeptical of that information.
And it's also good to like have like, you know, multiple sources on a certain subject. I know I'm leaning towards the politically left, but sometimes I like to like look at like the politically right just to see, kind of get that alternate perspective. Plus, it is also a good way to kind of like solve problems. It's a good way to kind of just like not be blind to a situation, but just kind of like look at perspective, look at like what different ways we can solve a problem and what is the best way to solve a problem.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's actually, give me 2 seconds to find it. So a philosopher named Stanford Goldberg, he coined a term called coverage reliability. And he was mostly talking about epistemic bubbles, but it applies to echo chambers as well. That is when, so we have a source or a group of sources, say you get most of your information from like social media or whatever. Each one of those individuals might be completely reliable on their source of information. But if they might not have coverage reliability, which means you might not be getting important pieces of information, you might be missing entire things. So say I have friends that are super into, say, like hockey, baseball, and soccer. I might be completely up to date on those three things, but know nothing about what's going on with, say, football.
Gotcha.
And so that's coverage reliability. You really need to get a broad scope of information to avoid the epistemic bubble. The problem is even if you see that information when you're in an echo chamber, you could read it, you could hear them, you could listen to the arguments all day long, but you've been taught that person is distrustful, that person is lying, that person is deceiving you.
Wrong.
Yeah, and so no matter the problem with the echo chamber is exposure to the information isn't enough. There has to be some way to rebuild that trust, or at least to be equally distrustful of your source of information, to have a more objective viewpoint.
Yeah, and I think like with social media, it's super easy to kind of like indirectly like get yourself into an echo chamber without even having like outside influences, since you can block other people, you can like suppress other people's opinion, and then there's also, I guess, somewhat of a bit of a censorship. I don't think it's too crazy, but
so I agree. That's why social media, I think personally the epistemic bubble is more of an issue with social media. I think the echo chambers is more with like news and like, say, radio style media.
Yeah.
Stuff like even a podcast, right? In order to have the echo chamber, you need a broadcaster or a host or something in order for them to tell you, hey, this is the information and this is why you shouldn't trust the other people.
Yeah.
If there's nobody there to say don't trust the other people and it's just information, an echo chamber is hard to form, but those epistemic bubbles easily, especially on social media with algorithms trying to filter out what information and things you would like to see. It's going to recommend information that you're going to agree with. It's not going to show you the contrary points of view. In fact, it's going to actively filter those out, and that's what's important for trying to decide whether or not you've made a good decision or whether you've come to the right conclusion with an issue.
Yeah, and I think like what I'm trying to do personally to get like out of an echo chamber is there's a couple of different like the media bias chart. I try to like look at a news article with like 3 different sources. If like there's a nothing being reported on the right, that's probably a news article that's like, you know, really pro leftist. But if it's like being blocked from the left, and it's probably being pro right. But you gotta look at that central like kind of viewpoint and see why is it not being reported, or like how they kind of filter out the information. Because even sometimes with like news articles, they really try to like have this perspective or have this like really big bias, like the radical left, or you know, this and this and that, for like just doing the simple action, or you know, suppression, or they'll have a lot of like the additional opinions. And I was actually having a conversation with an eye doctor this morning, and we were just talking about like, if you can't find 4 articles of like a left, a right, and like a middle like bias of like a particular subject, it's probably like being suppressed for a reason. And I think like what I've also discovered earlier this week is just like, I think why that distrust of the media is because like people just need to know like, hey, this has potentially a left bias, this has a potentially right bias. You just need to be upfront about it and just be like, hey, look.
Well, and I wanna I don't do this often, but I want to come to the media's defense a little bit. I don't think it's necessary. I don't want to demonize the media for doing this. When we have to realize that most of the media broadcasters and people making decisions are themselves trapped in these kinds of echo chambers. Especially in the United States, where political parties are such a massive contributor to the echo chamber problem. These people might think they're reporting 100% accurately, but it's because they don't trust the outside information as well. They also don't trust the other side of the aisle. They also are disregarding people's arguments, so they're only getting partial information. Yeah, there's the old saying, there's three sides to every story: his side, your side, and the truth.
Yeah.
Well, the truth is what we're looking for, so we can't really just be picking sides if we want to get there.
True. So, and then as well as that, how would you get out of like an echo chamber, or what would be the recommended step to get out of an echo chamber?
So like I said earlier, the epistemic bubble is much easier to break out of. You just need to expose yourself or have somebody expose you to the other information. It's not that you don't trust this stuff, you just literally haven't heard the arguments. The echo chamber, though, is much more difficult. It requires a person who's in an echo chamber to actively choose to have an open mind about another source of information that they have been being told to discredit for however long. This information has been demonized in their eyes, right? They look at a far right supporter, they're going to think the liberal media is the epitome of evil, right? Like it takes a lot to kind of go beyond one's perspective and be like, okay, well, let me hear out what they have to say and at least try to make my own decision on it. There's one example in this article by Dr. Nguyen. He's a professor out of Utah. The example is a young man who was raised, his father was head of some neo-Nazi group in the United States. I'm trying to find his name. But he went off to college, and everybody at his university, he went to a fairly liberal university, everybody kind of hated him because he was a known neo-Nazi. There was a student, a young Jewish boy, who decided he was gonna try to befriend this guy. He was gonna be patient, try to understand him, even knowing that he was Jewish and the other guy was a neo-Nazi. After befriending that person, he realized that what he had been taught to demonize these people, that these people were bad or cruel or whatever he may have been taught about Jewish people was wrong. And that was the best example that Dr. Nguyen could find of actually breaking free of an echo chamber, the most obvious example anyway. He completely turned his back on these neo-Nazi views and went on to help support the Jewish community and stuff like that.
Kind of reminds me of this story where there was this, like, I think it was like a jazz musician, and he would play at like KKK rallies, but he's black, so or I think it was like a piano player, and he would just play at these like rallies, and he would kind of open up these guys' perspectives, and he converted like a couple of like members to like get outside of like a echo chamber of the KKK, where they like obviously hated black people. And it was really cool to kind of hear from like how he did it, where he was just kind of like having these casual conversations, and little by little he kind of like questioned their beliefs, questioned kind of like their logic, and steadily started getting people out of that like area and that like kind of like that rabbit hole.
Yes, so that is a famous method for trying to break out of an echo chamber. It's called Dr. Nguyen calls it the Cartesian reboot, because it's essentially that's what Descartes did in his meditations. He tried to eliminate all his beliefs and start with only that he could be certain of. The problem is that it's just not possible. You can't eliminate all your beliefs and start from nothing. It's not a feasible
This isn't
task.
Men in Black, where you can get that like little flash.
Yeah, you can't just
forget.
start with a blank slate. You have to start with some beliefs about the world in order to build off of. And so that's why I think that example. By the way, I found the college student's name. His name was Derek Black. He was in Florida, and he was raised by his father was a neo-Nazi. He was groomed from childhood to be a neo-Nazi leader, and that I imagine his father was quite mad when he befriended this Jewish guy.
No, he was just really open-minded. It's like, you know what? That's it.
Yeah, and that's it. Goes on to talk about, though, even more the backlash of trying to leave an echo chamber can sometimes be pretty radical, because like especially for Derek here, his whole family was wrapped up in this neo-Nazi, almost cult-like group. That's he had been raised amongst those people. That was his friend and social group, was people within that. So essentially, by breaking free of this echo chamber and befriending this Jewish guy in college, that's all he had left. He left that whole social group. He wouldn't be accepted back, and so like breaking free of echo chambers is very difficult and often quite costly. But
you have to restart your entire life. Like even if it's not like, you know, hey, you have to have this blank slate to kind of convince somebody. They have to have this blank identity just to kind of like get out of it.
Yeah,
it's just pressing the refresh, and it's fucked up that, like, you know, some people, like, you know, your own parents can be just like, I don't even know you anymore.
And because of like the almost cult-like effect that an echo chamber has, people are often super invested in it, right? These aren't usually just the beliefs or ideas that they have that they are willing to change willy-nilly. These are things they're typically really committed to, right? Like, again, look at our political parties in the United States. Most Democrats are radically against the Republicans. Most Republicans are radically against the Democrats. Like, these are things they're committed to. When in reality, what we need to have is an open conversation where we can have compromise and meet in the middle and work things out. That's how this country was designed to function.
It's not even like doing any action. It's like, you know, the pro, I would say, with democracy is you get, like, you know, the different viewpoints, you get the different perspectives, you get the different ideas, but like, you know, for how many years there's been just, like, you know, two political parties, like 150, and even before then it was just the Whig versus the Democrats before then, and it was just, you know, just like, at this point it's just each political party is just trying to one up each other. It's not like they don't care about actually, like, you know, getting the country in a better state. It's just make your enemies look embarrassed, and while you look completely fantastic. It's not providing solutions. It's not really doing anything.
And like I said, I don't want to demonize them either, because that's not necessarily their fault in every situation. It's an effect of the echo chambers, right?
Yeah.
Those political parties aren't necessarily, I don't think, trying to one up the other party. They legitimately think the other party has malintent, right? Like, I remember during the Trump election, they thought that the Democrats were literally trying to rig the election and steal the presidency. Right? I mean, like, they some of these people, if you're in an echo chamber, you often legitimately think that the other side is an enemy, is evil, is a wrongdoer.
And they're following, like, this guy blindly, but, like, when people, they always said, like, oh, well, the media is out to be against Trump. Oh, this and this and that. Like, anyone that said, like, anything negative about Trump, it was just kind of like, well, you're wrong. And
yeah, instead of acknowledging the accusations and responding to them, the typical course of action that a politician does is tries to discredit his opposition. Try to say, well, that doesn't make sense because such and such person can't make whatever for that whatever reason. They're not trying to acknowledge the accusation or respond to it. They're trying to discredit the other sources of information, which is exactly what an echo chamber is, why they exist. Because then your membership, if they're not going to listen to the guy who's attacking you, you don't have to worry about his attacks.
Yeah.
Right? Say he could bring up a 100% valid argument. It could be make 100% sense. But if your supporters aren't going to listen to him, you still haven't lost any votes. And so that's, I think, why it's so common in political parties, is because the whole voting aspect in the United States. Yeah. By causing an echo chamber, you essentially secure the votes of those within your group, within your range of influence.
And it isn't even like, well, actually, even with, like, you know, the 2020 election, I think a good point to also mention is just the fear aspect. This was a whole election basically ran by fear. Like, I've been told by people from, like, the Democrats, people that are, like, you know, Republican, oh, hey, you need to vote for this guy because this guy is going to turn America to hell. And that was the same argument from, like, both sides. Like, this wasn't just, like, it was multiple people too, and it's like we need to stop and, like, take a look and be like, hey, like, if that's the reason why we're voting, maybe we need to kind of chill out a little bit and realize, okay, let's assess the facts, let's assess the things, let's judge by our actions, and have, you know, not just two main candidates and just kind of, like, haze out all the, like, you know, different other candidates.
No, don't get me wrong. I'm against political parties in general. But yeah, no, that what you described is the perpetuation of an echo chamber in effect. Those people, the politicians now, the political parties have taught them that the opposition is dangerous, is not to be trusted. They have whatever they have a different agenda than us, some sort of secret agenda. Whether you want to say that's the Democrats, the Republicans, some deep state thing, whoever.
Mm-hmm.
They're all in the belief that there's somebody who's with malicious intent trying to disrupt the way our political process works. And so they pass that on to their viewers and future politicians, and it just continues to escalate. So like you said, we're voting not for a candidate per se, but against another one. You just don't want that person in office because that person will destroy the country or something. And that's simply not true, right? That's echo chambers causing fear in its members. Mm-hmm. No one person has the authority or the power to destroy our country. That's why we have a three-part government. That's why we have the Congress, Senate, House of Representatives. Like, the president does not have complete power over this country. Mm-hmm. Things have to be passed. He can't just do whatever he wants.
We're not a dictatorship, even though we like to.
So just because you disagree with this person's mindset or this person's beliefs does not mean that they should be considered dangerous or a threat to America, right? It's just a different group. It's just a different party that you've been taught to fear, really.
Mm-hmm. It's perspective that you need to look at. Maybe instead of like understanding, something I was kind of like looking at, it was one way to kind of get people to understand your perspective is you go with them, look at the way that they kind of came up with like their conclusion, and then kind of show that, hey, this is how I got my answer. Mm-hmm. And instead of kind of like having that conversation of just like kind of like going through like, you know, the different perspectives on the same problem, we just kind of dismiss one over the other, and it's just like we're not even like looking at like different perspectives. We're not looking at the consequences. We're not looking at like, you know, the causes of of these different problems. We're just kind of like ignoring just its fear. And sadly, like, you know, this isn't the first time that, you know, fear kind of united was like influencing like politics, but it's just it's
happened throughout history. Echo chambers are a natural phenomenon. It's not like somebody intentionally caused these. It's simply caused by the social structures that we're using to get information. Mm-hmm. The structures like social media and stuff like that were not made to be informative. It's not like reading a textbook or something. It's not informative. You post opinions there. It's built for social reasons. It's meant for connecting with people you like, people you know, seeing things you enjoy. It's not supposed to be as a source of information, but that's what we're using it for. Yeah. And so a structure designed for social reasons, to find things you enjoy, using that to find information is very harmful. It gives you a false sense of confidence because you get nothing but reinforcing ideas back. I saw it was a video on Instagram the other day. The guy was trying to prove a point. He Googled, does coffee cause blindness? All right, comes up, the first result says yes. Excess coffee, more than 2 cups a day, can damage your vision. Now I can Google, is coffee good for your eyesight? Yes, 1 to 2 cups of coffee a day can improve your eyesight. You see what I'm saying? It's the way we use these structures to find information is simply not what they're designed for. It's not set up to be a reliable, fact-checked kind of situation. Mm-hmm. That's why I really like that places like Instagram have included those fact-check markers, right? Like this... Even if they are sometimes abused again because there's still politicalization and bias in the fact check world, right? Whoever's doing that on Instagram, I've seen some pretty wild things fact checked. It's still, I think it's better. You're not going into it thinking this is all 100% fact.
Because there was like in the 2016 election, you heard about like misinformation, and that was kind of the same topic. And even like, I will admit, there was actually like a meme that I kept seeing like pop up on Facebook where it was like it was with Donald Trump, and he was talking about how like, oh, if he were to like be a candidate, he would be a Republican because the fan base was just easy to manipulate and blah blah this and that. Turns out he never said that, and like they actually fact checked kind of like where this like information kind of came. There's nothing on the records. He had no record of saying that. It was just kind of a falsification, just kind of like make him look bad. That like he can just kind of like manipulate the viewers. Mm-hmm. But then again, you know, the left, you can also say like, you know, the right tries to make look bad constantly.
Well, like, and there's the thing is in situations like that. So say I assume it was some liberal media that made that accusation.
Yeah.
The liberal media's viewers probably to this day think that's fact. Mm-hmm. Because they've been taught to distrust the conservative media, who are the ones that produced evidence saying that this is not the case, this wasn't said. And so that's the problem with echo chambers. Like you said, there's obvious evidence that never happened. But a large group of people will never turn on Fox News to see that. They will only go back to their liberal news sources, and the liberal news sources are going to go and recant what they said. Their job is to help the Democratic Party to improve, to have more liberal viewership, right?
Yeah.
So they're not. It's, you could say whatever you want about the opposition to an echo chamber, and the people in the echo chamber will believe you, and that's unfortunate, but it's just the fact. And so, right, that accusation made that, hey, your group is easy to manipulate. Well, that's true, because they're in an echo chamber, just like our group, and just like everybody is. All these political groups are all in an echo chamber. They're all easy to manipulate because of the structure of information they're getting, because of the way this is set up, and by the distrust that they've got towards their opposition. They're all easy to manipulate. They'll believe anything you say.
So, like, take attack ads with a grain of salt and kind of see where they kind of came to that conclusion. Because, like, for instance, I had a teacher that was, like, running for, like, a city council office. And there was just these really kind of nasty, like, attack ads for him, where basically he was saying, oh, he hates America because he said, he was talking about, like, American exceptionalism, how, like, sometimes if you look a little too deeply, it's kind of hard to defend some of America's actions, you know, like, for instance, just, I don't know.
Oh, the list goes on. We don't
we don't need to bring in other topics. But it was just kind of like, hey, and then, like, he, like, noticed all these attack ads. The person he was running against realized, like, okay, hey, that's not right. And they all kind of, like, united. Like, there was a big group that was kind of really against that, but they kept posting it, kept giving out flyers to, like, everyone and their mothers. And it was like, and I understand they're trying to, like, own the libs and stuff like that, but, like, I mean, you're really kind of trying to sabotage this dude's, like, you know, not just trying to win the election for whatever office. You're trying to, like, this is the man's life, right? Yeah, like he was a teacher at the time, but yet you're having this, like, you're telling you know, all these neighbors and stuff like that, he hates America, he's teaching your kids to hate America, he's enforcing these, like, crazy philosophies, and it's just like, dude, like, leave him alone. Like,
and that's, like, part of the problem. That's the demonization I'm talking about. These people probably don't even acknowledge or realize that this man is a teacher. He's worked with our kids in our community for however long. He's done all this good stuff. They simply see him as the opposition, and the opposition has been demonized. Yeah. Right? They don't see that. That's part of the problem. They don't see them even as people per se. They see them as their opponent, and their opponent has ill will. Their opponent is going to do something harmful to their community or to their, in this case, the school system. And that's a legitimate concern, right? I'm not saying we should be just trusting of letting anybody run whatever they want, right? Yeah. But we also need to understand that this is the United States. We're a democracy. Individuals run for things. We run through parties, unfortunately, in my opinion. But that's just how things go. Not everybody in your opposing party is bad. They just have a different viewpoint. They see things slightly differently. It's not bad. America was built on this kind of compromise, this coming together. Democracy is built on different perspectives, clashing together, try to find neutral ground, a good compromise that will suit everybody. Yeah. That can't happen if we demonize the opposition. There's no compromise. We're simply trying to go back and forth, and that's just not the way a democracy is set up. We saw in the most recent election, even with Joe Biden winning, it was pretty close, right? Yeah. It was pretty close on most fronts. That means about half of our country is conservative and about half our country is liberal leaning. If we're going to try to pass policies for the United States, we need to understand that we're passing policies for both groups. Yeah. That's why, like, President Biden's always keeps saying the president for everybody, even if that's not going too well for him so far. Yeah. That the idea of trying to be a president not just for your party but for everyone, I think is a healthy step towards trying to overcome the prevalence of these echo chambers. And sometimes with actions, like, you know, you're gonna, you know, anger a base, but at the same time, like, you know, try and do something that's also positive. Like, I think, like, the hardest part about leadership is just, like, no matter what you do, you're always gonna piss off somebody.
and people are going to try to defend you. People are going to try to like not defend you. I think just kind of like looking at like just.
And the other thing is, people are always going to think. Some people are always going to think you did it on purpose. Whatever you did that might have offended them, they're going to think it was an attack against them, or at least your opposing media is going to try to portray it that way, right?
Now I understand why there's only two parties that like you really want to like kind of go for that shot with like just being like president. But I also think like just having multiple perspectives, kind of like, you know, giving more like, you know, liability with like, you know, like minor parties could also like be really beneficial. And just like, I know people.
I disagree. I actually think there should be no parties, not more.
Okay. Well, not just like, well, no parties or multiple parties that
well,
just.
I guess my problem isn't with the existence of a party. It's with a person's commitment to a specific party. If that party agrees with you on every single ideal, then I guess yes, you fully right to be committed to that party. But like, I am registered as a Democrat, but I don't agree with the Democrats on everything. I tend to align more with most of what they say. Right. So for the most part, I register with them just because that's how our voting system in the United States works. Especially in Nebraska, you have to be registered if you want to participate in the primaries, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, it kind of forces us to pick a side, even though I don't personally align with one side, and I think most Americans don't completely align with their party either. I think they just more align with this one than the other. And then once you join that party, that's when the echo chamber effect starts coming in. You start hearing more and more discrediting.
You get your newsletters, you like look, like obviously like algorithms start like posting kind of like, you know, leftist side of things. But it's, and I mean, I was kind of like trying to like open my, while I was trying to open my perspective, then I was starting to get like, you know, Second Amendment like ads. I was getting like recommendations for like Tucker Carlson, and I was just like, whoa. Hey, listen, I was just looking for a neutral standpoint. I'm not going full Republican.
No,
I'm just looking.
That's another problem I think we should touch on, especially with the epistemic bubbles.
Yeah.
Even if you're looking for neutral sources, you need to be cautious about what those neutral sources are populated with. Dr. Nguyen, in his article, had a good example. He was talking about a Facebook group called Great Health Facts. And so hypothetically, he was assembling a Facebook group and he was going to name it Great Health Facts. And in this hypothetical, he supported the paleo diet as the best, was the most healthy diet. And so he starts this Facebook group called Great Health Facts, and in it he looks for people that he thinks are educators smart on this. And so he looks for other people that support the paleo diet, people that have talked about it, people who have posted about the paleo diet. Now this group is called Great Health Facts, but is filled only with people that support the paleo diet.
Gotcha.
You created an epistemic bubble here. You've got people looking for neutral information, but are only getting one perspective. They're only getting one view on it. There's no.
Imagine being the first person that being like, "Hey, paleo diet kind of sucks," and then just like all the belittlement that you might.
No, and that's the thing is like that's what the page would need is someone to go and say, "Hey, you know, maybe this diet's better than the paleo diet," and give reasons for a different. Something other than paleo diet, and then you have popped the epistemic bubble. Still, obviously, it's a pretty biased page. There's only one post against the paleo diet, and the rest are for it. But like, having those other opinions is good. That's healthy. It's necessary. That's how we reflect on our own judgments.
The spreading of ideas is like kind of like what kind of it's meant to be for like a democracy. It's meant to be for like kind of like. Looking at like, you know, what you know, I think the real idea of freedom was supposed to be with like, you know, the country. It was just and like the melting pot and like looking at different perspectives.
Yeah. The idea of for knowledge, right? We're looking for truth, not for opinions. And the way we find truth is by opinions attacking each other and disproving some opinions, proving others, disproving aspects of things, proving other aspects of things, until eventually we find out what is actually the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? That's what college campuses try to revolve around. That's why classes are open for discussion. The teachers want students to question what they're being taught. They want students to challenge what is being said most of the time, right? Not every professor would be okay with that in his classroom, but like that's the idea. That's why college campuses are set up the way they are. That's why there's big open spaces. That's why there's places for protest and public speech on college campuses. Is the entire idea of a university is for these clash of ideas to come together and to help us all get closer to the truth as a global community. That's not going to happen if we refuse to listen to other opinions. There's no clashing, there's no coming together, there's no compromise, there's no checking one's own mistakes if one is only committed to people that share your ideals.
So, taking away from like this podcast, what would you say is like for someone that's in an echo chamber, what are the three major steps that they should do to kind of like get out of it?
So again, I don't think anybody would be able to. I don't think people in an echo chamber would be able to realize they're in an echo chamber. So my advice wouldn't be for people that think they're echo chambered. If you think you're echo chambered, you've already broken out of it. You've already started to question your information sources. Everybody, just as a whole, should just be more skeptical of the sources of information that they're listening to, and should try to have a more broad range of sources they're listening to. If you don't hear some media telling you you're wrong or having an opinion that you disagree with, you are not listening to a broad enough range of sources. There is no way that everybody agrees with you on every position. Look for people that disagree with you. Those are the people you learn from. And people that agree with you are only going to reinforce your belief. Another example here that Nguyen used was think about picking up the New York Times. You open it up, you read, you've got your information, and you're like, yes, something happened today. And then you pick up another copy of the New York Times, open up the same page, and go, oh, yeah, so this paper reported the same thing. It must be true. What you want to do is you need to have multiple copies of different news sources. You can't pick up multiple copies of the same thing and use it as confirmation of the one before it. And that's what most people do more inadvertently. They listen to the same radio host, they listen to the same podcast, they listen to the same news stations, they read the same newspapers.
Yeah. And I think like the problem is just like I feel like people feel like they don't have the time, so they don't take the time to kind of like look and evaluate like multiple sources of like information. No,
you're 100% right. You're 100% right. That's another part of this article that I was reading. That's why we need these filters, like the social media algorithms and stuff. There's simply too much information for one person to sort through it all on their own. Yeah. That's why you pick your sources right. Just make sure you have a variety of sources to do that filtering for you. You don't want all your sources coming from the same perspective. And so even if you don't want to sort through everything, because like I said, there's simply too much information going on a daily basis in today's world for one person to be able to sift through all of it. Yeah.
I like one of the things that I do, I'll see if I can pull it up on my phone. So there's a kind of like an Instagram news outlet that really what it does is kind of show a topic of a story, and then it'll show the percentage of the right, like reporting on it. It'll show a portion of the center reporting on it, and then it'll show the percentage of like the left reporting on it. And sometimes you'll find like news stories that like get thrown under the rug with like the right and at the left, and it's like really interesting to kind of see. And or they'll take like a topic and they'll go through like they'll talk about like I don't know, some like random explosion that happened, or like some random like filibuster or something like that, and they'll kind of show like a typical like left-wing like article of it, a typical center article for it, and a typical like right-wing like article for it, to kind of show kind of like that bias or like how it's being worded too.
And that's a good way to help fight the kind of echo chambers and epistemic bubbles that the parties create. But like I said, it's even broader than just those two, right? Those are two examples, but even the media source that is trying to focus on those, it has its own bias as well. They are specifically trying to be nonpartisan, which I guess is good if you're trying to avoid echo chambers of local parties, but there's still a skew there. Yeah. You still want multiple sources to come together, and so even if it says like there's 100 reports from the Republicans and say 10 from the Democrats or whatever, read one of each, right? Don't just be like, yes, the Republicans are reporting on this, so it must be in favor of them and a bad thing for the Democrats, right? Yeah. Also, if there's not reporting, I don't know if that's necessary evidence of some sort of manipulation or foul play, right? There's a lot to report. Not every news station is going to be able to report on the same thing. if it's already being reported on 50 other news stations, maybe try something different on yours is probably what sometimes they're thinking.
Yeah.
Right? And so I don't know if just because they don't report on it that they're trying to hide it. It's just maybe not their highest priority.
Well, thank you for coming out today. This is Brookside Chats. I'm your host, Brooklyn, and with me again was my guest, Austin Exline.
Yes, thanks for having me, Brooke.
All right, and take it easy, y'all.